So I asked you guys on Instagram and YouTube to submit some Harry Potter hot takes for me to judge and respond to. And you guys submitted so many I couldn't fit them into a single video, so here we are with part 2. If you didn't see the first one, you can check it out, there's a link in the description. Okay, Theo1951 says Lockhart is as evil as most of the Death Eaters. Not just seeking fame, he is literally ruining the lives and possible loved ones' lives too. Imagine a close friend or relative in the state that Lockhart was in at St. Mungo's. I have been screaming this to anyone who will listen for so long. First of all, wiping somebody's memory should be an unforgivable curse. And the fact that we see the Ministry do it so nonchalantly during the Quidditch World Cup, just wiping the memories of muggles, really dreadful. Really, really awful. And so Lockhart doing this to chase fame is really hideous. What a horrendous person. And I genuinely think if he hadn't been written as comic relief in the Chamber of Secrets, and they'd written him to be a bit more sinister, people would widely consider him one of the most evil characters in the series. Simply Me says, I don't find Fred and George funny. Doesn't mean I hate them, I respect their inventiveness and their entrepreneurial spirit, I just wouldn't be their customer. Some of their jokes really do go too far, and while I don't exactly like Percy, I do find myself taking his side when they make him a constant target. It's not a prank if both parties aren't laughing. There are parts of this I really agree with. I don't find myself laughing at that many Fred and George scenes. Like a lot of the time they make fun of Percy or Hermione because they just don't hold the same values as Fred and George do. Because they want to follow the rules and they don't think certain things that break the rules are particularly funny. Particularly when they argue with Hermione about the fact she won't let them test their sweets on first-year students. Like some of the accidents that we have seen around Hogwarts. Harry losing all of the bones in his arm. Hermione having her teeth grow and grow and grow. Hermione getting stuck as a cat. Harry testing out spells that he doesn't recognise from the Half-Blood Prince diary and almost murdering Malfoy. Harrietta Edgecombe getting the word sneak written across her face in pimples that stays for years. Potential side effect of magic and potions. I just think that risk is too high, and I think them trying to test these sweets on kids, I'm with Hermione on that. With Percy, I kind of get the point. If he's not laughing along, then the prank crosses into picking on him or bullying him. Now, I do think Percy takes himself far too seriously, and that there's a line, and he would rather the Weasley twins met him here, and they want Percy to meet them here, and neither side really are willing to compromise with the other. Like, for example, at the Burrow when Percy is trying to write his report, and he wants everyone to be silent all of the time. It's a complex sibling relationship. I do think the twins take it too far sometimes. Okay, brace yourself for this one. This is intense. Samoji Malakost says, Umbridge just did what she thought was right, and it's hard to put the blame on her. I mean, the Ministry, arguably the most powerful institution in the Wizarding Britain, stood behind her whole career. Confirmation bias is a real thing, and if you already think you are right, you find any excuse to continue. I also strongly believe she did not enjoy torturing children. She just enjoyed order and did everything necessary to achieve it. The ends justify the means kind of mentality. She was a well-written puppet for a malfunctioning system, a victim of her own ambition. She did evil things, but was not evil per se. If I had a trophy for the hottest take, I think that would be it. I think you've won hottest takes. Now, this is deep and there's lots of aspects to it. I actually love the detail you've gone into. And I will say, I think there is some merit to some of the things that you're saying. Umbridge is very, very much a symptom of a malfunctioning system. A system where Fudge has been so used to grasping control of the wizarding world, and the idea of that control slipping away, someone like Umbridge comes in to try and make sure it doesn't. With that being said, it is a pretty big jump from I follow the rules, I follow the law, and even if the repercussions and the consequences are kind of unpleasant, we still have to do it for the greater good. The big jump from that to let's torture children. Even if you say she didn't enjoy it, which may be the case, she still does it over and over and over again. And she does it to children as young as 11. There is no justifying that. And I do think if you are trying to write her own justifications of things, that in her head the ends justify the means, then maybe, yes, I can see that. But for us as readers to try and justify that those ends justify those means, I'm just not sure we get there. Donut Talk to Me says, if Harry grew up with James and Lily or Sirius, he would have been insufferable. I totally read that wrong. I read that as James and Lily or James and Sirius when it should have been James and Lily or Sirius. Although I fully believe if something had happened to Lily but not James, then Sirius would have stepped up and they would have raised Harry together. But yeah, I do think Harry would have been insufferable if his arrogant father or his arrogant godfather had been the ones to raise him. Particularly if somehow he was the boy who lived and was raised with those arrogant father figures. From what we know about Lily, she seems kind of grounded. She calls James out for being arrogant. She calls Severus Snape out for using the word mudblood. Can't believe I just equated those two things. A slur and just being arrogant. Either way, you like to think Lily would ground Harry if his head was getting a bit too big for his body. But also I do think we need to remember that James, Sirius and Lily joined the Order of the Phoenix during the First War. Like, it's important to know they did have a moral compass. They knew what was right. Even if what we know about them as teenagers, particularly James and Sirius, isn't particularly great. I also worry that we're towing the line of saying, well, thank God Harry was raised in an abusive household, otherwise he would have been an arrogant and insufferable git. Because I think we can all say, not a hot take, Harry shouldn't have been raised in an abusive household. Okay, Donick Bab says Percy was a proud, albeit uptight academic. Arthur telling him he only got his job at the ministry so they could get close to the Weasley family was incredibly insulting to him and would have hurt him deeply. He achieved more OWLs than Hermione, and look how stressed she was in The Prisoner of Azkaban. He worked his whole life for that, and Arthur cut him to the bone with one sentence. Yeah, I do think there needs to be a bit more empathy for Percy. Like, some of the things that he does, the way he treats Molly in particular, sending that jumper back to her. Like, just keep the jumper and don't wear it. You don't need to send it back. He's very insensitive, he's quite pompous, quite full of himself. But this kid was ridiculed by Fred and George. When we get to know Charlie and Bill in The Goblet of Fire, it's also likely he was probably the butt of the joke with them from time to time as well, especially growing up. And I feel like probably in that situation, he knows he's really intelligent. He's probably just biding his time like, you know what, I'm going to get a great job, I'm going to be independent, I'm going to be successful, and then I'll show them. And so when he gets that great job for Arthur to tell him, you only got that because they wanted to get close to us, that's a sucky thing to say to your kid. Plus, the fact that he got more OWLs than Hermione, does that mean he had a time turner as well? I do think Percy needs a little bit more slack, but at the same time we can recognize that a lot of what he does, the fact he doesn't come back until literally the final battle in the war, and until then, as far as we know, he's still siding with the Ministry, who has literally fallen to Voldemort's will at that point. I can see why he was upset and why he was offended and why he dug his heels in and really abandoned his family. I can see that. But there's also no excuse for how far he let it go and some of the really cruel things he did. Theo1951 says Neville would have been such a better wizard if his grandma had the decency to give him his own wand. Yeah, I think probably. I do want to know how common hand-me-down wands are in the wizarding world. Like, because we know Ron had one, right? Didn't it used to be Bill's or Charlie's? I can't remember which. And Neville uses his father's old wand. And that's just 2 people in Harry's immediate circle. So how many people that we don't know about at Hogwarts have hand-me-down wands? And if it's that common to have hand-me-down wands, does it make that much of a difference to how powerful your magic is? Like when Ollivander is talking about true wand ownership and the allegiance of the wand, he talks about how there's like debate, or it's not like an accepted science in the wizarding world. And so while I'm sure that Neville would have been better, and in fact does get better when he gets his own wand after the Order of the Phoenix, I'm not sure to what extent it truly makes a difference. Somewhat, sure, but that much? I think a big part of Neville's glow up as a wizard is his confidence. The fact he has people who believe in him, that he doesn't feel like an outsider, and he feels like he can do these things. Okay, the Blue Artist said, I genuinely found Aragog's death sad. Genuinely sad? I don't know. It was a giant spider who tried to eat Harry and Ron when they were 12. I don't know that I formed that much of an emotional attachment. Now, a lot of my emotional reactions in fiction come from seeing other people's reactions to things. So like if a character dies, doesn't do too much to me until I see the people who care about them crying and mourning them. That's when I start to get upset. I'm just such an empath, you know? And so seeing or reading about Hagrid being upset, I can see why that would move you. But of all the deaths in the series, Aragog's probably impacted me the least emotionally. Okay, I know I already handed out a trophy for the hottest take, but Amber Charles has come in to try and take that title. I'd smash Professor Snape. Smash him in the face with a frying pan, maybe. Look, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If that's your type, I'm not here to shame you. If your thing is the kind of person whose hair is so greasy you can set it on fire, look, you do you. It's not my place to judge. But for me personally, kind of bullying children when you're a grown adult is enough to turn me off. Lucy Claire Bailey says Luna and Ron should have ended up together. Why? Like, I'm not going to shame anybody's ships. I know there's lots of fan fictions around that people read that sort of deepen their connection to a romantic couple, but I'm not sure there is anything in this series to sort of suggest that Ron and Luna have any chemistry, would have any future together if they got involved romantically. Although, when people pick on Luna, she doesn't seem that bothered. And so Ron, who canonically has the emotional range of a teaspoon, probably says insensitive things all the time, and so she could probably just, you know, brush it off and not care. Certainly more than I imagine Hermione would. So, maybe there is a future for Ron and Luna. Luke Titmus says, it is more narratively satisfying for Percy to be redeemed than die than it was for Fred to die. Yes. Luke Titmus, yes. In my first Harry Potter Hot Takes video, I mentioned that whilst I'm not against the fact that Fred died, I don't really think it serves as much of a catalyst to other characters because the story sort of stops a couple of chapters later. We don't see the emotional fallout from other characters' perspectives. And so for Fred, dying needs to be important to his arc. It needs to feel like a satisfying way for things to have ended. Like, yeah, he needed to go through that for it to feel like a complete journey for his character. And it just didn't. Like, I get what it symbolized for the world as a whole. On a character basis, Fred dying sort of served no purpose. But Percy, who removed himself for his family for 3 years before finally coming back just before the last battle. Having been proud for so long, coming back with his tail between his legs and apologizing and calling himself a prat, dying alongside his brother in a battle where he's fighting for the very people he stood against for the last 3 years, sacrificing himself for Dumbledore and Harry, people he told Ron to distance himself from just a couple of years earlier. Narratively, far more satisfying. Now, if we got a couple of extra chapters in the book where we saw the emotional fallout of Fred dying, we saw Molly and Arthur's reactions or George's reaction, then maybe you'd make a case that it was necessary that it was Fred. But as the book is written, Percy dying feels like a more satisfying choice than Fred dying. Sebastian says Harry has terrible daddy issues. There is no reason for him to think he's special to Dumbledore. Yeah, Harry definitely has daddy issues. We sort of see that in the way that he gravitates towards Hagrid and Lupin and Sirius and Dumbledore. The fact that when he sees his father being a bit of a bully in the Pensieve, he immediately needs to talk to Sirius and Lupin and clarify whether there's extra context to sort of alleviate the guilt. So yeah, Harry definitely has daddy issues. Do I think those daddy issues are why he feels so close to Dumbledore? Not overly. Like the Dumbledore cynics, and sometimes I am one, might say that it's his issues with family and being loved. Like the fact that he grew up with the Dursleys who never showed him any love or affection or respect is why he clings to any adult who kind of shows him any. And potentially that's contrived and deliberate so that Dumbledore can then manipulate him to follow his plan. So maybe there's something to this, but I do think Dumbledore does enough to make Harry feel special, to feel like he's important to Dumbledore. Maybe not in the first book or two, but certainly in the middle and towards the end of the series. Like, does Dumbledore visit anybody else in the hospital wing, have one-on-one chats with them, invite them for private lessons in their office? Ravine Jr. says Lavender deserved better. I'm with you. I think Lavender gets a bit of a bad rap. Bad rap? Bad rep? I never know which one it is, and I've said this in a video before and people in the comments told me, still can't remember. Now I get people don't love Lavender because she's kind of an obstacle that gets in the way of Ron and Hermione being together. But Lavender, though a little annoying, is just a teenager. In her first big relationship, she's had a crush on Ron for a while before they start dating. Sure, she comes on a little bit strong, she's a little bit obsessed with him. She's just a teenager who thinks she's in love. And I don't think she deserves the hate she gets for that. I was a teenager who thought I was in love once. I was annoying as hell. More than I am now, not as a teenager in love. Okay, Mr. JOC says Dumbledore is not the bad guy everybody makes him out to be. He literally has no choices. I'm not sure I agree that he has no choices. In fact, so many people follow his instructions that I would say he probably has more choices than most people in the grand scheme of things. And some of those choices he makes, I think, are terrible. Like when he says he had no choice but to leave Harry with the Dursleys because of the blood protection from his mother. I think about like the Fidelius charm, right? If the Fidelius charm is good enough to protect the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, why could you not have Harry being raised with you or with Sirius and put a Fidelius charm on that place? But what about Hogwarts? It's supposedly the safest place in the world, safer than Gringotts. That's why you moved the Philosopher's Stone there. You're telling me you couldn't protect Harry by raising him at Hogwarts, where you, Dumbledore, are all the time, knowing you are the one wizard that Voldemort always feared? So I don't buy it. I do think he had choices and he makes some terrible ones. That said, I think Dumbledore is the embodiment of the trolley argument. Like, I know it's bad that he's raising Harry as a pig for slaughter, but imagine a Voldemort train is coming along a track and it's gonna kill the entire wizarding world, but you can pull a lever and the train redirects to just kill Harry. You're telling me you're not pulling that lever? I don't know. I think he did have choices, but I also don't think he's this evil, manipulative mastermind that everyone makes him out to be. Hoskins Elizabeth said Michael Gambon over Richard Harris as Dumbledore and in general. I don't know that I agree. I also don't know that I disagree. I love Richard Harris as Dumbledore. When I read the books before the films come out, that is the Dumbledore I imagined. And it feels like a way closer representation of the Dumbledore on the book. Now, granted, I know that wasn't the original Dumbledore from the back of the book, or if this is even supposed to be Dumbledore, or maybe this guy was modeled on Richard Harris, I don't know. But Richard Harris is closer to the Dumbledore that I imagined. Softer and gentler, leaning more towards love than power. I do think Michael Gambon did great. I can't imagine Richard Harris having that battle at the end of Order of the Phoenix. But I just think Richard Harris will always feel like the right Dumbledore for me. Anya Strickland said Barty Crouch Jr. is the most complex and interesting character in the books. I'm not sure about the most interesting, but he's definitely up there. And I am gutted they killed him so early. I know he doesn't technically die because the Dementor's Kiss isn't killing you. It's close enough, right? He can't do anything after that, so he never comes back. He might as well have died. I have really strong feelings about how great of a character Barty Crouch Jr. could have been, and I outlined them all in this video, which includes what would happen if he came back at the end of the Order of the Phoenix to duel Mad-Eye Moody after their history in the Goblet of Fire, and what might have happened if he was there at the end of the Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore died. He really could have been a great character, and if you want to hear all about it, this is the video you want to watch next.